When it comes to cinematography and the quality of your cinematography, I would say the first 10% is in the camera equipment. Having the correct tools for the job is definitely going to help you out, but probably not as much as some people think. Then the next 30% is in the composition, the framing, the way that you move the camera, and the remaining 60% is in the lighting. The way that you choose to light your scene is going to have the single biggest effect on the look and the feel of the piece that you're creating. For example, the shots that you see here are lit very naturally because that's the look that we were going for. We made the creative decision to imitate daylight in this piece because I felt and we felt that that fit the style of the piece the best. And if you're not thinking about this sort of thing, then it's going to be much harder to make your piece look cinematic. So you get the idea, lighting's incredibly important, but it's no good just knowing this, you need to know how to use the lights effectively. And I'm going to try my best to cover that in today's video. Hopefully I do a half decent job, but before we start on any of that, we need to take a look at the lights we're actually going to be using, and the first one is the Aputure 300D. Now this is an incredibly powerful and incredibly versatile LED lamp. Now the reason that it is so versatile is because it has a balance mount on the front of it, which means that we can use it to mount up all sorts of different accessories. The balance mount is like a universal mount, and the Aputure 120D, which is the second light that we're using, also has that same mount. It's just, it's not quite as bright as the bigger brother, the Aputure 300D. Then the final light that we're going to be using is the Aputure LS1, which looks completely different. It doesn't have the balance mount, it's an LED light panel, but the cool thing about this light is that it's actually color tunable, so you can go between tungsten and daylight and all of the other color temperatures in between, so you can mix and match it with other light sources, which makes it really, really useful. So I think that covers all of the technical details and all of the gear. So let's get started on how to create certain looks. This first lighting setup is interview lighting. Now this is going to be incredibly useful for anyone who's shooting corporate videos or even maybe mini documentaries. Now what I will say about this clip is that I did try my hardest to keep a straight face, but for some reason I couldn't seem to do it.
Why are you laughing?
I don't know, I can't hold a straight face, alright. Anyway, the actual lighting setup itself is pretty simple. We have me sat at about a 20-degree angle to the camera, and then we have the Aputure 300D sat at about a 45-degree angle to me, and it's set up quite high and it's pointing slightly downwards. Now on the front of the Aputure we've got a softbox which is going to soften the light, and we also have a grid on the front of the softbox which is going to allow us to control the light to stop it from spilling onto the background. And then behind me we have the Aputure LS1, which is shining light at the back of my head and also the back of my shoulders to separate me from the background, and also it's catching the side of my face and my jaw to just give it a little bit of shape, because otherwise you can kind of end up with a bit of a shadowy blob, which isn't particularly very good. So I think that just about covers everything for this lighting setup. Let's move on to the next one, which is bar, nightclub / Blade Runner style lighting. Now this one was a lot of fun because I've never really done anything like this before, but I started things off by sitting myself at my kitchen table at about a 45-degree angle to the camera. And then behind me, just over my left shoulder, I set up the Aputure 300D once again with the softbox and the grid, but this time I used the Lee 111 filter, which shines pink light onto the back of me. And then directly opposite the Aputure 300D we have the Aputure LS1, which is shining light through the Lee 115 filter, also known as peacock blue, and that's catching the other side of my face, so we get this transition between pink and blue as the light wraps around me. And as I move around you can see that the ratios kind of change, and I think it looks pretty good. Then in the background we have the Aputure 120D, which is shining light towards the ceiling of my stairwell, and that's going through a Lee 119 filter, which is another blue colour, and that gives that nice atmospheric hazy blue that is pouring down through the stairs, and that's supposed to act as the motivation for the blue light that's being cast onto my face. So all in all, I'm pretty happy with this one. Obviously it's a bit of a challenge to turn my little kitchen into a bar and nightclub scene, but I think it's ended up looking pretty good. So let's move on to the final lighting setup of today's video, which is the nighttime exterior. And this one was very daunting to do because trying to imitate moonlight is really, really difficult. Now the trick with it is to get the right balance of blue. So first things first with this one, I grabbed the Aputure 300D and set it up at around about a 45-degree angle to me and relatively high up, and it was shining through a softbox and also a half CT blue filter, which gives it that slightly bluish tinge. Now the reason that I didn't use a grid on the front of the softbox is because I wanted as much light as possible to spill onto the walls of the house to give it that uniform moonlight look. Then to accentuate the light that is coming out from the house, because believe it or not much light was actually hitting my back, I grabbed the Aputure LS1, set it to the tungsten color temperature, and then also added some more orange using the Lee 105 orange filter, so it was a super orange light, and I shone that at the back of me to give the impression that light is spilling out from the house and actually being cast around me. And I think it's ended up looking quite natural. So I think that just about covers everything. We've covered a lot of facts, numbers and figures in this video, so hopefully all of it made sense. If it didn't, then I'm going to put all of the lighting diagrams down in the description that I drew for this video that will hopefully provide any extra details that perhaps you missed out on. Before I go, I also just want to say a big thank you to Aputure for providing the 120D and also the LS1 that we used in this video. They're fantastic lights, and I'm going to be using them from this point forth in my lighting setup. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next video. Is that alright? Okay.